Imagine you're standing on a street. A stranger stops you, holds out two unmarked bottles, and asks you to close your eyes and smell both. One costs $450. The other costs $35. 9 out of 10 people pick the cheaper one. Not because they're wrong. Not because they don't know good fragrance. Because in that blind test, the $35 bottle genuinely smells better. And here's the part that should make every luxury fragrance fan uncomfortable. A pattern that's been playing out across the entire fragrance industry for the last decade. And today, we're going inside it. I'm going to show you 8 fragrance clones that don't just compete with their designer originals, they outperform them. More projection, more longevity, more compliments. But this video isn't really about cheap alternatives. It's about something that's been quietly happening inside the most expensive bottles in the world. Something the brands will never put in a press release. Before we get to the clones, you need to understand why they exist. Because once you understand the real story, buying a $400 fragrance without asking questions starts to feel a lot less like luxury and a lot more like paying a tax for a logo. Let's get into it. Reformulation. When a fragrance house decides their bestseller is too expensive to produce, maybe a key ingredient spiked in price, maybe the brand got acquired, maybe they just want better margins, they quietly change the formula. Same bottle, same name, same price, different juice inside. This has been happening to some of the most iconic fragrances in the world. And the fragrance community noticed what used to be described as beast mode, projection that fills a room, longevity that lasts all day, started getting replaced with what enthusiasts now call skin scents. You spray it, and an hour later, only you can smell it, if that. And while the originals were getting quietly downgraded, something interesting happened on the other side of the market. Clone houses, mostly Middle Eastern brands operating on razor-thin margins, started making dupes. And because they were working from older formulas, using heavier concentrations, and leaning into a chemical called Ambroxan to force projection, some of them accidentally made something better. This is that story. Armaf clubbed the Nuit Intense Man versus Creed Aventus. Let's start with the most famous comparison in fragrance. Creed Aventus, the king, the legend, the $450 bottle that built an empire on the promise of smelling like a conqueror. Pineapple, birch smoke, musk. It was ferocious. It was a scent people call the most complimented fragrance ever made. If you buy Aventus today, what you're getting is a fraction of that original. It dries down into a polite, soft skin scent within a few hours. The projection that used to announce you when you walked into a room, mostly gone. You're paying for the legacy of what Aventus used to be. Now meet Armaf Club, the Nuit Intense Man, $35. Fair warning, the first 10 minutes are rough. There's a sharp, almost cleaning product edge to the opening that's genuinely off-putting. Don't judge it there. Because what happens after those 10 minutes is the reason this bottle has a cult following. The dry down is stunning, that same smoky, fruity depth that made vintage Aventus legendary. But louder, more projecting. It uses Ambroxan, that chemical amplifier, to push the scent off your skin and into the space around you. Where the current Aventus whispers after a few hours, this one is still talking 10 hours later. The clone outlasted the original. And the one thing that actually matters, how many times someone leans in and says, "What are you wearing?" The $35 bottle wins. Afnan 9 PM versus JPG Ultra Male. Missoni Wave versus Chanel Allure Sport Plus. Versace Pour. The reformulation problem isn't just a Creed issue. It's an industry-wide disease. Jean-Paul Gaultier's Ultra Male used to be the nightlife nuclear option. You wore it to a club, and you were heard before you arrived. It was loud, sweet, amber-forward, and completely unapologetic. Then it got reformulated to be polite. After 9 PM didn't get that memo. It costs around $30, and it sounds like Ultra Male at its peak. The same intoxicating sweetness, the same after-dark energy. If you've been chasing what Ultra Male used to smell like, this is it. The designers tamed the lion. Afnan left the cage open. Now, here's one that's a little different. Missoni Wave isn't copying one fragrance. It's combining two. Chanel Allure Sport and Versace Pour are both classics, both in the $100 to $120 range, both brilliant in completely different ways. Allure gives you that warm, creamy citrus. Versace gives you cool aquatic sea salt. Missoni Wave, at around $40, does both. The transition from its creamy orange opening into a sea salt dry down is something neither designer fragrance actually pulls off on its own. It's a hybrid that the original designers never thought to make. Sometimes a clone doesn't just copy the homework. It writes a better answer. Lattafa Khamrah versus Kilian Angel's Share. Turathi Blue versus Bvlgari Tygar now. We move into niche territory, and this is where the price gap gets genuinely absurd. Kilian Angel's share is a masterpiece. Cognac, oak, vanilla, cinnamon. It smells like the inside of a very expensive library at midnight. It also costs around $400 for a small bottle. It's the kind of fragrance that makes people stop mid-conversation to ask what you're wearing. Lattafa Khamrah is $25. And here's the interesting part. It's not an exact clone. It's more like a cover band that learns the original song and then adds a better bridge. Khamrah has dates and cinnamon woven into its base that makes it slightly more crowd-pleasing, slightly more wearable, slightly more likely to earn you that compliment in a real-world setting. For the average person who wants to smell incredible, not to collect a collector's piece, Khamrah actually wins. Then there's Bvlgari Tygar. Stunning grapefruit, refined, complex, easily one of the best fresh fragrances of the last decade. The one problem? It lasts maybe 2-3 hours at most, projecting like a whisper. You spray it, and by lunch it's gone. Turathi Blue is $30, and it fixes the one thing Tygar couldn't. Same grapefruit freshness, same polished character, but it actually lasts a full workday. That's not a small improvement. For a fragrance meant to be worn in professional settings, longevity is everything. Turathi Blue took the formula and finished the job. Lattafa Assad versus Dior Savage Elixir. Maison Alhambra Tobacco Touch versus Tom Ford Tobacco Vanille. Dior Savage Elixir is, objectively, a nuclear bomb. Spicy, dark, dense, it commands a room. It's also $230 for a 60 milliliters bottle. For a daily driver, that math gets painful fast. Lattafa Assad delivers around 90% of that experience for roughly 15% of the price. If you're someone who rotates fragrances, who doesn't want to burn through a $230 bottle every few months, Assad is the version you actually wear. You're not losing much. You're just being smarter about it. And then there's the Tom Ford conversation. Tobacco Vanille used to be the definitive winter fragrance. Thick, rich, a dense cloud of tobacco, vanilla, and spice that followed you into every room. Since Tom Ford's acquisition by Estee Lauder, that legendary longevity has quietly dropped. The formula feels lighter, more restrained. Maison Alhambra's Tobacco Touch brings back what Tobacco Vanille used to feel like. That heavy, lingering winter presence that gets people turning their heads in a cold room. If you've been disappointed by recent batches of Tobacco Vanille, this is the version that remembers what it was supposed to be. Armaf Club the Nuit Iconic versus Bleu de Chanel EDP/Perfume. We have to end with Bleu de Chanel, because Bleu de Chanel is by sales numbers the most popular men's fragrance ever made. It's the safe choice, the elegant choice, the you can't go wrong choice. And like the others on this list, it's been softened over time. The current formula is polished, refined, inoffensive. It's a beautiful fragrance that now whispers in a room rather than speaks. Armaf Club the Nude Iconic does the same thing the original used to do, but louder. It shouts. Sharper edges, more projection. The kind of presence that announces itself. In the world of compliments. In the world where you're wearing fragrance because you want someone to notice, the person who is heard wins. Here's the thing nobody in the luxury fragrance world wants to say out loud. You've been, in many cases, paying hundreds of dollars for a weakened version of a scent that a $30 clone have been faithfully preserving. The clones aren't the villains of the story. The villain is a business model that raises prices while cutting quality and counts on brand loyalty and beautiful packaging to stop customers from asking questions. Now, one last thing, and this is an insider tip that most fragrance reviewers skip over. If you buy any of these clones and your first impression is, this isn't that impressive, give it time. There's a process called maceration. As a fragrance bottle sits and ages, the ingredients blend and deepen. Many clone houses are bottling fresher product than the big designer brands. Let a clone sit for 6 to 8 weeks, and you'll often find it smells noticeably richer and more complex. Don't judge it on day one. So here's where we land. You aren't cheap for buying clones. You aren't settling. You're refusing to pay a marketing budget that doesn't smell like anything after lunch. The prestige is in the bottle. The reality is in the air. And right now, the air is being won by $30 bottles from Dubai. Which one of these are you adding to your collection? Or are you still paying the designer tax? Drop in the comments. And if you want a full breakdown of the best clone houses, which brands are consistent, which ones miss, that video is already up. Links in the description.